Welcome back to the Knowledgeable Programmer channel. This is the series where we are going through Codecademy's Learn-Express course. We are doing this series with my good friend Lloyd, who's a trainee developer, and he's starting to learn the back end. We're documenting this journey to benefit you and help you out along this journey of yours as well.
So this is middleware and the introduction. So writing code is a creative process. Programmers will be quick to differ in opinion on whether the solution to a problem should be implemented in one way or another, citing trade-offs in algorithms, structures, and even languages. Due to these trade-offs, the problems programmers face most frequently will have several different solutions, all correct, but all written differently with various factors considered. Because correct code can take so many different forms, developers have cultural notions of code quality that is somewhat independent of these decisions. One concept that is central to the notion of quality code is that all code is read by many more times than is written. Maintaining and updating code takes up much more of a software developer's time than production. There are many ways to make this less of a burden, and these techniques frequently correspond to code quality principles. Naming variables consistently so that they're identifiable is one way to improve the readability of a code base. Another pillar of code quality is avoiding duplication of code within a code base. Code duplication is an invitation for bugs. If incorrect code is copy and pasted in multiple places, a developer might remedy the flaws in only a few of those places and fail to fix the buggy code elsewhere. In this course, we will investigate several ways to avoid replication and reduce complexity. In programming in general, this often means putting the reused code into reusable containers like functions and objects. In Express specifically, this will also mean composing our desired functionality into a series of middleware functions.
So yeah, middleware functions can be used to pre-process data. When we used to have the parameters in the reg.params, we could pre-process the params object and put instead of having like reg.params, we can saying that params was receiving an ID, we can just create a variable called reg.id and pass it whatever the value was of reg.params. So when it gets to the route handler, it is already there available.
So dry in code with functions. Now dry, I know what dry means.
Don't repeat yourself.
Yes. So beyond labeling, good code will leverage the strength of its programming language to avoid performing the same tasks. Take a look at the following codes. Yeah, you can see what they're doing. So basically what they're trying to say is you're rewriting the whole function, but only the value of this is changing.
They're just, like you said, replacing the parameter to the main function.
Yeah, so basically what you'd want to do is when you call this function, you would just pass it the number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so while these three function definitions are not exact duplicates of each other, a well-designed application will be flexible enough to join similar functionality in a single element. So we've got the same function that takes in a number, add end, and then const num added equals num plus addend, maybe.
yeah.
Yes. So as you can see, by adding an argument to the earlier functions, we can simplify our application code, which will ultimately save time should we realize that we also want an add 50 function and an add 100 function. Code that performs the same task in multiple places is repetitive, and the quality coder's credo is don't repeat yourself. If a program performs similar tasks without refactoring into a function, it is said to violate dry. Violating dry is a programmer's way of complaining. The script is saying the same thing over and over. We can do the same thing with less code. Let's try not to repeat ourselves in this code base by repurposing some of the more glaringly repeated code into functions we can call instead. So step one, we have provided a front end for testing out your routes throughout this lesson. To get it to display in each exercise, start your server, node app.js. Okay, so let's do that. Node app.js. And give this a refresh, see if there's anything there. And then resize the browser to the right. Okay, so there's the browser. Probably close this for a minute. Make this a bit more readable for you. A tool should appear that allows you to set request verbs, paths, and body information, and then make request using that information. Use this tool to ensure your server is working as expected throughout this lesson, checking your server logs and examining the returned responses as you make changes. Well, that's actually pretty sick. They've sort of like built the mini Postman.
Yes, it's a way to get the different HTTP methods inside the browser. So yeah, it's really nice.
So currently, each route logs a message with a HTTP method and a message that request was received, i.e. get request received. So let's have a look at them. Okay, so we've got we hit them. Oh yeah, okay. Write a function log request that takes a single string parameter, verb, and logs a message formatted in the same fashion. Okay, so I'm going to make a function. So const, and I'll just copy and paste again so I don't make errors. And that's going to be equal to this, which takes in a verb. And it's going to log basically the same thing. So if I console.log.
And use the backticks. Yeah.
Not verb. Verb. And I'll just because they do test quite strictly, I'll just grab this. Okay. I think that's what they're asking for. Replace the console.log calls that open each route and replace each with a call to log request, passing in the method name. Okay, that's straightforward enough. So replace this, grab the function, and we're just going to pass in get. We're just going to grab this code, come down here, and obviously that is a post request.
Yeah, but look at their convention. They're capitalizing everything. So the verbs, the HTTP verbs, capitalize them. Like the whole thing, like all in uppercase.
All right, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
You know, I probably would have missed that.
Yeah, they want it in the same fashion. So yeah. And you see that in their logs, the verb was capitalized, all uppercase. Yeah.
Dry-in routes with app.use. So by now, you may have noticed that our efforts to not repeat ourselves have resulted in us putting the same function call over and over throughout our code. Isn't that somewhat contradictory? You would be absolutely right to think so. How do we get code to run every time one of our Express routes is called without repeating ourselves? We write something called middleware. Middleware is code that executes between a server receiving a request and sending a response. It operates on the boundary, so to speak, between those two HTTP actions. In Express, middleware is a function. Middleware can perform logic on the request and response objects, such as inspecting a request, performing some logic based on the request, attaching information to the response, attaching a status to the response, sending the response back to the user, or simply passing the request and response to another middleware. Middleware can do any combination of those things or anything else a JavaScript function can do. So we've got a example there, Will.
Yeah. So basically, here is where we are going to start using the next keyword, the next object that we had previously. So it's, you see the middleware functions receive the request, the response, and the next. So yeah, that's what they're showing there.
So the previous code snippet is an example of middleware in action. App.use takes a callback function that it will call for every received request. In this example, every time the server receives a request, it will find the first registered middleware function and call it. In this case, the server will find the callback function specified above, call it, and print out request received. You might be wondering what else our application is responsible for that isn't related to middleware. The answer is not much. To quote the Express documentation, an Express application is essentially a series of middleware function calls. It is precisely this service that we leverage Express for. In addition to performing the routing that allows us to communicate appropriate data for each separate endpoint, we can perform application logic we need by implementing the necessary middleware. Sounds cool?
Yeah. So I think they're going to suggest us that we extract the code from the function and make it into a middleware.
After your log request function, there is an unfinished call to app.use. So that is going to be down there. Its callback will be called before every route. We'll be moving the login out of log request, which is this thing. So we no longer have access to the verb string. Since we can access the request object, however, we can use the rec.method property, which will always be equal to the verb of the request. Okay, it's good to know. Finish the app.use callback by replacing the login behavior of log request. Okay, so now they haven't said to delete it. So what I'll do is I'll just pass in the rec.method, but not in
Yeah.
rec.method.
Don't. Can you go back and put that inside of the template string instead of verb?
Can I put it in a template string instead of verb?
Control C. Undo a couple times.
Oh, okay, Z. I thought you said C.
Like instead of verb, pass request that method.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Since we okay.
They are not saying it, but if you want to skip a few steps ahead, after the console.log, you can call the next as a function, yeah, like that.
Okay, so I think I'm gonna have to stop and start this thing. Node app.js. Okay. Yeah, I've never actually seen the next, so I'm hoping. Well, it's bound to come up.
Yeah, so if you want, I can explain. So basically, since Express, like they said, it's a series of middleware. This app.use is gonna happen since it's before the other routers in the app.js. Could you move the editor to show that below is the other function, other app.use or the app.get? Since we are using in line number 30 this function, this will run before all the get. What the next will do is that it will console.log the method, and it will call next. So meaning that it will send this, since this was intercepted before it got to the get request or the post or the put or the delete. The next will say like, oh, I'm finished using this function. Let's send the liberate this request so it can reach like the app.get/beans or the app.get/beans, app.post/beans. Did I make myself clear, or did I make it worse?
No, I think I got it. So basically, what you said was because this middleware is like what it says, it's in the middle, it intercepts. This basically is telling Express to move on to the next function.
Exactly. So since this is first, it will will enter and console.log. But since we're doing next, it's like it comes out of the middleware and starts checking again to if the HTTP verb is get, post, or whatever, and then matches the endpoint as well.
Okay, cool, man. So it's saying to delete basically everything to do with console.login. So just gonna do Control X on that, on this. There, there. Okay, let's try that. Now we've removed so now we've removed a significant amount of code, but our routes aren't returning responses because something is still missing from our first app.use call. Move on to the next exercise when you're ready.
Yeah, so I just did a little preview of what they're going to show you next.
A little sample of what's to come. So the next function. So it seems like our middleware was successful. It logged out. The middleware stack is processed in the order they appear in the application file. So that middleware defined later happens after middleware defined before. It's important to note that this is regardless of method. An app.use that occurs after an app.get will get called after the app.get. Observe the following code. Let me just open that if you will. Yep.
So yeah, in this function, they are intercepting the request that it's sent to the server, and they're using the console.log to say that a sorcerer approaches, and they're, like you saw in the previous exercise, I talked to you about calling the next function. So after the next function is called, it will then go down to app.get and match the route and the verb.
So in the above code, the routes are called in the order that they appear in the file, provided the previous route called next, and thus pass control to the next middleware. We can see that the final matching call was not printed. So yeah, we've got some, well, there's a next missing, isn't there? So yeah, it's going to log this, then it's going to just keep logging it until it gets to the end, and there's no next. We can see that the final matching call was not printed. This is because the previous middleware did not invoke the next function to run the following middleware. An express middleware is a function with 3 parameters: the request, the response, and next. The sequence is expressed by a set of callback functions invoked progressively after each middleware performs its purpose. The third argument to a middleware function, next, should get explicitly called as the last part of the middleware's body. This will hand off the processing of the request and the construction of the response to the next middleware in the stack. Yeah, so it's basically what you said. When it hits that function, it hits the next, and it just goes on to the next middleware.
Yeah, because if you don't use the next, it will just get stuck in that initial middleware.
Yeah. So add a call to next after your login statement so that your middleware will be executed before moving on to your routes. So we just pop it in there. So request and response parameters. So they were what we were writing over and over in the first series.
So that lets you know that even the functions that we were writing before to use the get method, the post, they are middleware as well.
Right. So recall the function signature of an express middleware, i.e. rec, so request, response, and next. You might recognize this signature as being the very same that we've used for express routes in the past. Well, there's a perfect good reason for that. Express routes are middleware. Every route created in Express is also a middleware function handling the request and response objects at that part of the stack. Express routes also have the option of sending a response body and status code and closing the connection. These 2 features are a byproduct of express routes being middleware. Because all express middleware functions have access to the request, the response, and the next middleware in the stack. Yeah, so that's interesting. I didn't know that. So they're middleware too then.
That's, like if you go to a get or a post, they are middleware as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys, for watching. We'll continue this series in my channel. There is a link in the description for the playlist. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification so you get the notification when the next video it's published. And thanks for watching.